He is an expert in cloud solutions, data, and artificial intelligence, working at Microsoft. With his extensive experience in the field, he is a perfect guide into the world of AI. Давайте поприветствуем Сорин Пеште, Cloud Solution Architect по Data и AI in Microsoft. Давайте еще раз поаплодируем.
Are we good? Okay.
Обратите внимание на верхние строчки. Видим?
Okay.
Отлично.
Okay. Добрый день. Меня зовут Сорин Пеште. Я живу в Бухаресте, Румыния, и работаю в Microsoft. Thank you. I needed those applause because that is the high level of my Russian language skills. It's about 30 years since I last studied Russian in school, and I didn't have a lot of chance to practice. So thank you for DataBoom for inviting me and giving me a chance to practice my Russian. The rest of the talk will be in English. Hopefully that's fine. And there are also Russian live subtitles over on the top. So I wanted to take this moment today to talk to you about how you can actually harness the power of AI by creating and customizing AI assistants. Oops. Okay, so Sergey already talked a little bit about ChatGPT and how it actually went from 0 to 100 million users in like 2 months. The reason for that is because ChatGPT was the first application really that was able to bring this field of AI and to regular people and allow regular people through natural language to use AI. AI, depending on who you ask, has existed for more than 50 years, and there were AI projects and implementations in the 90s and 2000s and so on, but AI was never really approachable. You had to be an expert, you had to be a data scientist, you had to understand a lot of things about statistics to use AI. ChatGPT changed that paradigm and generative AI in general and said everyone can now approach and use AI, right? And you can ask ChatGPT questions and can give you answers in natural language, which made it extremely popular, right? Now, the problem is it works very well for normal questions and for a personal use. But when it comes to applying the same generative AI technology to business, there are a lot of hurdles and a lot of potential problems. This is a slide that my sales colleagues love to show that, you know, every company, if you invest $1 in AI, you will make back $3.50 in less than a year, and AI will essentially make you a lot of money really quickly in business scenarios. What is less obvious is that a lot of these studies are done on companies that are already have a lot of AI experience, and they've used AI for many decades in some cases. But the problem is that when you are actually starting out and you want to start using AI in business scenarios, things aren't so simple anymore. And there are a lot of potential things that can completely stop you in your tracks and derail your project. So things like which technology to use. There are a ton of options and the technology moves very fast. All of the demos that you will see in my presentation today did not exist a year and a half ago. So what to use is one question. Do we have the right people to develop and use these technologies? Usually requires people with expertise, and actually most of the organizations say that don't have enough expertise to implement AI. Then there's things about exposing these AI to your own data, because if it's just like generic data, it's not really all that useful. To make it really useful, you want it to have access to your own data, right? And then there's the problem, okay, if I expose my data to AI, where does this data end up? Does Microsoft use it? Does OpenAI get to use it and train their AI further and so on? So there's lots of questions like this, right? So there can be a lot of things stopping you. And at this point, you really have one or two options. And Sergey also thought about this at the beginning, is you can either use pre-built AI, integrate into the tools that your company is using, or you can develop custom AI to use in whatever scenario you seem fit. Microsoft offers you both options through Microsoft Copilot that is basically pre-built AI from Microsoft, and now it exists in a huge range of Microsoft products, including Office and Dynamics and so on. And there is also the Azure AI platform, which I'll also talk about, which allows you to build your own AI assistants. So for Copilot, like we were saying, there are actually a lot of Copilots. The one that is getting the most use, the second most use, I would say, is Microsoft 365 Copilot. This is an AI assistant integrated into Office apps and Microsoft 365 apps, right? So Word, Excel, Outlook, PowerPoint, and Teams, and a few others. The good thing about this AI is that it's already built, and you can, it's already integrated into the tools that you hopefully use, like Excel and so on. You can expose it and safely and securely, you can expose it to your own data. Whatever documents and databases you may have, you can expose that information to Copilot. You can customize it. If the out-of-the-box experience is not really what you want, you can customize it. And there is also a way to drive adoption, to actually help people, train people to use it, understand how much use it gets and why certain people may not use it. So all of this is kind of part of the Microsoft 365 Copilot platform. What it is, essentially, it's a few things. It's a chat, essentially. It's an assistant that is integrated in all of the tools that I mentioned. It has access to what we call Microsoft Graph. This is basically the Active Directory information about the organization structure and roles and who is doing what and so on. And there is also a tool called Copilot Studio. It's a web-based tool that allows you to customize these, the behaviors of these Copilots if you need, and even create different agents for other scenarios. So I'll show you a few demos. I won't have time to show all of the tools, but I will show you a couple of them. Let's start with Copilot in Excel. So how many people use Excel? Ooh, okay, I got almost everyone. Yeah, Excel is like the world's most used database still. Frighteningly amount of the world engineering runs on Excel or databases. And a lot of people use it. So there is now an assistant in Excel called Copilot in Excel. Oh, sorry, that should have been mentioned that Copilot is actually available in quite a few languages. There are 37 as of this talk. As of next week, there will be more. Russian is supported, Kazakh will be supported. And obviously, you don't have to talk to these Copilots in English only, even though that's what the demos will show today. So for Excel, let's say that now I have some data here about my sales. Maybe the text is not quite legible, but essentially I have a bunch of sales data with units sold, category, and the products that I'm selling. And I'm now able to, I have this data in Excel. I also have a bunch of other sheets over at the bottom. I have data about pricing. I have data about customers, and so on. And now, instead of, I mean, I'm sure everyone is an Excel expert. I'm not. I've stopped saying that a long time ago. But essentially what it can do is you can, in natural language, ask questions about your data. So for example, I want you to add a new column with total revenue and use all the worksheet that you have available. So in that case, I actually need to, okay. In that case, it will actually generate the formula automatically, the Excel formula. It will show you what the result would look like, and then we'll apply that by creating the new column, right? So you just tell it what you want to add. It will actually use all sorts of Excel formulas, and it will add that column. And then you can actually ask more questions. What is the total revenue for each category in 2024? And then it will actually apply the formula, make the aggregation, calculate it, and then it will show you a chart. You can also do formatting. In that case, it just says, I want all the rows for which for which the total sales were below a specific threshold for a specific category of products, I want those to be highlighted in red. So everything that was home chargers and the value was less than 100,000, I want you to highlight in red, right? So it just does that for you automatically in the Excel interface. So essentially formulas, creating columns, charts, and formatting. Okay. The next thing that Copilot in Excel can do is analyze text data. So for instance, we have another sheet here with the reviews that our products are getting. These are in natural language, and people can basically write whatever they want in the review for the home chargers and so on, right? So we can use Copilot to analyze these the contents of these test reviews. So for instance, we can go in and say, give me all the reviews that mention issues related to charging, right? Like charging is slow, it doesn't work, and so on. So in that case, it will actually do an analytics, running an analysis of the text. It will essentially highlight all of the reviews that, that mention that particular problem, right? Or that particular area. And I think I missed one. Okay. Oh yeah, sorry about that. Okay, and can also do summarization. So for example, just tell me what are the top 3 problems, right? I have like 1,000 reviews in my website. What are the main things that people are complaining about my products? And then we'll give you a summarization saying that service issues, charging speed, installation, usability. So we will just summarize these thousands of columns and give you like the top 3 most complaints, right? The most the people are complaining about. Okay. It can also do Excel, Copilot in Excel can also do advanced analytics, including forecasting. It's using the new feature in Excel. Nowadays, you can even write Python in Excel. So you can actually transform data in Excel using Python. And Copilot knows Python quite well, actually. So for example, let's say I have a chart with my sales over time, over different categories, which Copilot can also generate. I'm going to ask it to make a forecast. Please forecast my sales for the next period, right? So I can go in and say, for this nice chart, can you forecast revenue by category for the next 2 years, right? And you will actually generate Python to do this. There are Python libraries to do forecasting. And it will basically show you the code. And then it will run the code and will give you the forecasting. For each forecasting, you will have like a most probable value. And then you will have a sort of interval where the value may fall, right? And this is essentially a feature that Copilot can do, because Copilot can actually write code very well. Also wanted to show some features of Copilot in PowerPoint. I've actually started using this quite a lot. So Copilot is actually, in PowerPoint, is very good at helping you build PowerPoints faster. And it does it in a better way, I would say, than I see most of my colleagues building PowerPoints. In that the first thing that it does when you ask it to build you a presentation is it creates an outline, creates a sort of a narrative, right? So we want to build a presentation about the advantages of having, if you're a retailer, like a big shopping mall or something, what are the advantages of you having like EV chargers in your premises, right? What are the benefits of installing EV chargers? And it starts by doing the narrative first, right? So it doesn't just jump into doing slides. It will just say, okay, these are the areas that we need to cover. Maybe this section of attracting new customers I don't want. I want to add a new section. So by hand, you can then start to change the narrative with Copilot support and say, yeah. So I want to highlight these benefits that are actually in a separate Word document. I want those to be included in the PowerPoint as well. I also want another topic with success stories, maybe some customer case that I have documented in another document, separate document that I have access to. So all of this you can change, right? It will propose to you a narrative, but then you can start changing and referencing other documents. And then it will start generating slides. And to generate slides, it will use both the text output and also generate and retrieve images. So you can point it to your internal image library, or to public image libraries online. And you can also use the AI to generate images. If there is not like a specific image for a scenario, you can actually generate an image. So you'll be able to get a sort of set of slides for each chapter in the narrative. And then you'll be able to obviously adjust those slides either by hand or further with the help of Copilot. So you'll have these slides. You can review them, obviously. This is the result of this generation. And then you can go in and say, maybe I want to also add an image here just for this slide, because it seems it's kind of empty. And you can go in and say, add a brand image for a commercial EV charging station. It's a brand image, so I want it to go and search my image database. Or I can say, generate an image for this particular slide. And you will use the AI to generate an image for that purpose, right? So both are available. And all of these, you can see, you can also tell it, maybe you was too quick to notice, but you can also tell it to follow a specific template. Like if you have a specific way of designing your slides and colors, scheme and so on, you will actually follow that schema, so it's kind of on brand for your company, right? Another useful thing, this is probably the one that I use the most, to be honest, is the Copilot in Teams. Teams is our online communication service. And Teams basically is really good at a few things: creating the transcript of the conversation, taking the meeting notes and the action items, and also giving you a sort of a timeline of what was discussed. So there's a meeting, you know, people are writing in the chat, people are speaking and talking about different things during the meeting. Right? You may even have missed this meeting. You don't actually know, or maybe you just joined halfway and you don't know what was actually discussed. So you have this ability to highlight, first of all, to highlight the meeting summary, where you can see the timeline of who was speaking and when and so on. You have an area of meeting notes here in the middle about what people were discussing and so on, and what was the general result. And then the follow-up tasks over at the bottom is also generated by Copilot, where it's just saying, Danielle needs to go on and follow up with the customer or something, right? So very good summary of the meeting. Oops. And then you can also go on and also ask questions, like, for example, are there any things that are unresolved, right? Anything that kind of like open questions that were left unanswered during the meeting. And then Copilot will go through the transcript and will find out whether there were things that people asked that there was actually no answer for, right? I have to admit, I am actually missing a lot more meetings now that I can just go on and watch afterwards and figure out whether they even talked about my own project or my own to-dos. Okay. Okay, so these are kind of a few examples. I don't really have time to show all of them. So there is also Copilot in Word and to help you draft documents. There's a Copilot in Outlook to help you write emails better and so on. So these are built in, but then what happens when you want to build kind of a custom scenario? And the built-in Copilots don't really do enough for what you're trying to do. We do have a tool, a web-based tool, which is called Copilot Studio, that allows you to build an agent and configure an agent for a specific task. This is a web-based tool, like I said. And first of all, I will show you the experience. Essentially, you're trying to build a kind of a field service agent that can help people in the field when they try to repair diverse like equipment. And they have different questions about that equipment. And it can be something like, hey, I'm trying to start this equipment and I'm getting a specific error. What am I supposed to do? And then the AI will go through the documentation about that equipment that you have already, right? And it will try and figure out what are the kind of troubleshooting steps for that particular error. And it's a conversation you can keep up. We can follow up with questions and say, okay, I tried this, doesn't work. Any other thing I can do? Or I'm trying this and I'm getting some other error. So essentially kind of a field service assistant that is available to your field to troubleshoot problems and things like that. Oops, that's kind of jumped ahead a bit. Okay. So the way you do this, the way you build this kind of custom experience is you go to this area called Create a Copilot Agent, and you chat with the studio and tell it what your Copilot should do, right? So this is a tool more aimed for business users. We'll get to developers in a bit. But for business users, that they can actually begin by just telling the AI what kind of agent they want to build. So they will go to that Create a Copilot Agent over on the right side, right? And it will just start typing in, okay, what do you want your agent to do? And you are basically, I want to build a field service agent, and you want to assist with on-site repair visits. And you have to provide step-by-step instructions. Then the next question is where do I get my information, right? Where is the documentation about all the products? And then you can specify an internal website. It can be whatever, it can be intranet, it can be SharePoint, it can be some document somewhere, it can be some other system that has the documentation that you need, right? Okay, and then you can have some more instructions. You can still talk to them, to the AI, or you can go to the configuration tabs, and then you have all sorts of options. Like maybe you also want to get the information from Dynamics or some other database or things like that. So you can connect your custom agent to all sorts of sources. Obviously, you can change the icon. You can change all sorts of things about your agent, right? And then you will create this agent, and then you can share this agent with whoever you choose. You can apply security, like only specific roles or groups and so on can access that agent. And then you will be available. You can expose it through Teams or through a website or to a platform, a web-based interface. Okay.
Народ, мы как? На связи? Давайте поаплодируем и взбодримся.
All right. Next Copilot, and actually the first Copilot that we launched, and the one that gets the most use, even more than Microsoft 365 Copilot, is GitHub Copilot. Who here is a developer? Few people, right? Developing code, writing code. GitHub Copilot is essentially kind of a buddy that helps you with code. And I don't just say helps you to write code. I've seen everyone says GitHub Copilot can write code. You can give it some natural language instructions about what you want your code to do, and it will generate a code to do that, right? And it's true, it can do that. But I use this tool every day, even more than Microsoft 365 Copilot or other AIs. And I find that's actually not where most of my time is saved by Copilot. It can write code. So you give it like a few instructions. Like this, I want to make this function, and this is what it's supposed to do, and it just generates the code. What it also does is write unit tests. Who here writes unit tests out of the developers? One or two. Why don't the rest of you write unit tests? It's boring, it takes a long time, and maybe we don't need it, right? Well, you will find out in production whether you need it or not. But this is one of the most time-consuming and not fun things to do as a developer, to write unit tests, to automatically test your code every time some change is made. And I don't like doing it, but Copilot is actually saving me a lot of time in this regard, right? If I intend to actually ship that code to production, I want unit tests, believe me. And this actually saves me a lot more time than just writing the function. Writing the function maybe save me, I don't know, 10 minutes, but writing the unit test saves me a lot more. Copilot, GitHub Copilot can also document code. Who of the developers likes to write documentation for code? You do like it? Are you sure? Okay. I have to confess that I hate writing code documentation, and I also hate reading other people's code that is not documented. So it's also a kind of a time-consuming task, and you have to write it in a certain way. And it actually saves me a lot of time, and I thank you, GitHub Copilot, for writing my documentation for me and making me maybe a little less hated by the developer community who might be reading my code. So code documentation, very underrated, saves you a lot of time and makes your code a lot more maintainable. It can also fix bugs. So this is really scenario dependent. It can work with different types of issues, not just missing dependencies and so on, but also finding some logical problems in your code. So it is able to fix bugs in that regard. Right, so you can have this kind of quick fix that is smart and is able to figure out what that error is saying and why is it a problem and how to fix it. So there's quite a few things. It's not just generating code. In fact, most of my time saving is not coming from generating the code, but generating everything else. So I really encourage you to try it. If you haven't tried it, you can even sign up for a free trial and see if you like it. There are quite a few studies about developer productivity using GitHub Copilot. I can vouch for every number. This was a 6-month study in Accenture with quite a few developers. I can vouch for maybe the bottom right one where it's just saying that you just spend a lot less time looking for information online. How do I build this function that does this? How many people do this every day, right? It takes you out of your flow. You have to go to Stack Overflow and to search and find maybe some code that works, maybe some code that doesn't work. I almost never do that anymore just because I prompt Copilot, hey, I need a function that does this or fixes this, and it just does it. So this is GitHub Copilot. Okay, there are other Copilots in the Microsoft Copilot family. And if I had to talk about each and every one of these, this presentation will be 3 hours long. And they are basically quite focused on different tasks, like, for example, Power BI Copilot to help you build dashboards, and Power Platform Copilot to help you build applications with little code and so on. Right? So there are different Copilots that do different things. And obviously, you can try each of those out and see if it actually fits what you're trying to do as an organization. Okay, but what if that's not enough, right? We have some built-in AI, that's great, but what if we actually have a more specific use case for an assistant that kind of out-of-the-box tools that you've seen don't really cover it, and we have to customize? This is where the second option comes into play, Azure AI, and Azure AI Studio is basically the web tool that you would be using. This is basically a kind of an end-to-end platform for building custom copilots. Right? So this is custom enough that the Copilot Studio cannot really help you. Or it may be the scenario that you actually want to expose these assistants externally to your customers, to say the general public, so anyone else that is kind of outside your company that does not really have a Microsoft 365 Copilot license. So you're trying to build your own application maybe, or your own online service, and you still want these assistant capabilities. This is where you would turn to Azure AI Studio to build custom copilots based on the same technologies underneath, the same large language models that Sergey also showed a bit in the beginning. Same large language models that power the Microsoft Copilot. There are quite a few use cases that we see. You can build all sorts of AI things with Azure AI Studio. The most important ones are like building your own assistant, Copilot, that can talk to the user. It can be speech analytics. So if you have a lot of audio that you need to process and find insights inside it, like for example for a call center scenario, there is also tooling for that. Content generation, so anything that has to do with generating new text for different purposes. Those kinds of things are we kind of see happening again and again in Azure AI Studio use. I won't go in at length about the partnership that Microsoft has with OpenAI. Basically, OpenAI is a separate company that does a lot of research in the generative AI field. They were the creators of the GPT large language models, and ChatGPT, the first application that kind of made them public, like very popular. And Microsoft, in this partnership, exposes these large language models through the Azure platform to developers, so they can integrate it, like I said, in their own application, their own mobile app, their own kind of experience that doesn't have anything to do with Microsoft products necessarily. One question that we get a lot is, okay, if I use Azure AI and I use, you know, the GPT-4 models or Mistral or Llama or some other models that are available, what happens with my data, right? Who controls that data? Where does this data end up with? Does OpenAI get access to this data and trains the next ChatGPT, so the next ChatGPT will know how my company works or something, right? So security and privacy. Basically what we have, what we say, and what we have in the terms of the service of this product is your data is your data. It is not our data. We do not make that available to anyone, including other customers, OpenAI themselves, so they can improve their models. That is not possible. We do not use it to improve our own services, so even like Copilot. That data is yours. And essentially, you can use it to improve over the built-in OpenAI models if you choose. Right? There is a possibility to take a pre-trained model from OpenAI, like GPT-4, for example, and further train it with your own data. In that case, the trained version is yours only to use. It is not shared with anyone else, and it is used exclusive. It is available exclusively for your use. Am I out of time? Okay.
No, you can continue.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so an example of how you may use Azure AI Studio. I have a document, a kind of interesting study that was done a few years ago by a Central Asia Institute about the future of Kazakhstan as a country. It's called Kazakhstan 2041. I found it quite interesting. It was written by a few researchers that have some experience in this area. And it's essentially a large PDF with a bunch of information in it. About the challenges that Kazakhstan may face in the next 20, 25 years, the opportunities, and some suggestions about foreign policy and internal economic development and so on. It's quite an interesting document I found, especially as a person who did not know much about Kazakhstan before coming here for the first time. So here is what Azure AI Studio looks like. It's a web-based interface. You have all sorts of options on the left, but we'll focus on this kind of playground, chat playground, which will allow you to prototype your solution, your custom AI. And you have an area where you select what kind of GPT model you want to use, and you may also give it some instructions and so on. And it basically has a kind of a playground interface where you can chat with the assistant that you're building. So you can just say hello. But then you can go on and add your own data, right? So you can say, I want you to learn from this data that I have. And you would go on, and you have some options here. I would just upload one file in this scenario. You can have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of files that you may want to use. And this file will then get indexed. You will get put aside and indexed for being able to be searched by the AI, and then you will create this kind of index. I'm skipping, so this presentation skips over a lot of important technical details, just to be, observant of time. But you have a lot more customization options that you would have in something like Copilot Studio. So you can tell it, how to index the information, if you want to break the documents down in a specific way, or maybe you want to work with like specific types of documents that are harder to read and so on. Maybe your documents have a lot of images in them. So there is a lot more customization available than in a tool that is already pre-built. That is the idea of Azure AI Studio. And I'm saying that you may want to use this over a pre-built AI or some tool that is in a Copilot, right? So then you would index this information and store it in an index. And then you also have all sorts of parameters that you can tweak, right? So you can select how much of the previous conversation that the assistant should remember, what is the length of the response that you want to have. There's even a parameter called temperature, which kind of controls how random the response should be or how creative the response should be, right? So there's all sorts of slides and knobs. You also have control over the strategy of the search in the documents, what kind of search you want to perform. Depending on which documents you have, some may work better than others, right? So there's a lot more customization available for a developer that would want to build a custom assistant this way. Obviously, the process takes longer, right? And then you would go in and ask questions. It's a question that I would ask my future assistant in this playground where I'm prototyping my solution as a developer. And I would get an answer, but this answer is also grounded. Essentially, you will have references to the responses to the source data, right? In this case, it's my single study that I found. So the responses will be grounded, and you will, in this way, will avoid kind of chances of hallucination and so on. And then you will have references for all of the sections that were, well, I mean, most of the sections that you were part of the response. I also asked it to respond in Russian. I have no idea if it actually did a good job or not, but you can actually talk to it, and depending on how you ask, if you ask in a different language, you will get an answer in that language, unless you specifically tell it not to answer in a language. But you will have capability, multi-language capability, even though the documents may only be in one language. So you maybe your entire documentation is in Kazakh. You can still chat with that data in English or Russian or any other language that you choose. Okay, so then you prototype your solution. You give it kind of a tuning. You may change some parameters. You may add some more documents. You may set it up the way you need it to answer. You may make the answer shorter or longer, and so on. And once you're ready, there is also an option to automatically deploy a web interface to give to users, right? So there is a option. As you can see, there's a lot of options to do, like test it and so on, evaluate it. But there is also option to deploy this in Teams or as a simple web app, like a web interface that end users can use, right? They can experience this new Copilot, and these end users do not have to be internal users with a Microsoft 365 license. They can be general public or customers and so on. So you will host this as a web app in Azure. You would give it some resources to host your website. And then you can also select an option to store the conversation history. Like I said, the service itself does not store your data, so you will not store the conversation. In OpenAI, it does not go anywhere except your tenant. But if you want to like review it and have it available, you can choose to store it in a separate database. That is that enable chat history checkbox does. So if you want a separate database, it will be a separate database with your conversation. If you don't select that, and it's not available. Okay, so in this case, it's the web application that is doing the saving, right? The front end that is doing the saving of the conversation because the AI service does not store it. So you will have an interface like this, which is, the code for this is open source. It's on GitHub. You can customize it. You can change whatever you want about it. You can put your own logo. You can change the layout and so on. And you can give to customers, and then customers can go on and test your solution, give you feedback and so on. It can be also integrated with Active Directory for security if you plan on a scenario just for internal users or specific users, or you can just open it to the public if that's the scenario you're going for. And you will be able to, like I said, ask the assistant different questions, and they will, the assistant will return grounded answers, so answers that have a basis in whatever documentation you provided in the previous step when you added your data. And obviously you can also set, it wasn't enough time to show this, but you can set like a strategy to reindex the data every once in a while. Maybe you get newer versions of the documents that you need to reindex. Maybe you get new documents that have specific security to them and you need to index them separately. So there is a lot of options in Azure AI Studio that a 10-minute overview cannot cover. But basically, if you're a developer and you need a lot of customization, or you target a scenario for a very large audience outside of your company, Azure AI Studio would be the way to go. And again, you have the references, citations from the source documents that you uploaded. Okay, I have 7 minutes left. I wanted to take a couple minutes to talk about the new AIs that are coming, and specifically about 2 new models that were launched maybe a month or so ago, O1 Preview and O1 Mini. This is a new generation of models, I would say, of large language models that are kind of designed a little bit different than the previous GPT 3, 4 models. A lot of sensation, when people try to talk to AI, the sensation is that essentially AI, large language models are just making things up as they go along, right? They just, you ask a question and it just starts generating a word and maybe the next word, essentially just makes things up as it goes along. And it doesn't seem, at least sometimes, it doesn't seem to have a sort of an idea as where it will end up with the complete generation. And it also doesn't always seem that it actually has a plan to solve the task that you gave, right? So if you have a relatively simple question whose answer can be found in some documentation or in a database, this may not be a problem. But if you give it more complex problems to solve, things that require a sort of planning, something that a human would not rush into an answer. I actually need to think about this problem and maybe break it down into steps and figure out what I need to find out first before answering your question. Then this kind of rapid generation doesn't really work. In some psychology books, this kind of difference is referred to as system 1 versus system 2 thinking. So more instinctual and rapid versus more deliberate and planning, right? And O1 Preview and Mini are more designed for the second scenario. If you ask these models a question, you will not start seeing generating answers immediately. Most of the time, you will think for at least 20, 30 seconds, more than a minute. And it's more suitable for questions that actually require deliberate thought, right? So things like logical problem solving, more complex math. Maybe someone was actually mentioning having trouble with getting a GPT to solve math, right? All sorts of scientific inquiries, things like that. So basically, if the problem is complex enough and you don't really need an answer right away, you can let the AI think about it and formulate a plan to solve it. O1 would be a good model to test. Okay, this is how it looks like. I'm still in the chat playground for Azure AI Studio, which you can use to talk to O1 as well. And it's still preview, so there are still, missing features maybe, but you can have a conversation. Ooh. I'm gonna, sorry about that. So essentially you can post, what's happening here is it actually posting a, there we go. Where are we? There we go. I wanted to show 4 more. Okay, so there is an example of, I'm sure the text is not legible, but essentially it gives a kind of a math problem. I'll skip this one since the text is probably not visible enough. But let's say I have a bunch of data in this case. There is data about sales and also data about my employees, so how many employees I have in every branch, in every location, and also how much sales I had for different types of products over a specific period of time. And again, the text might not be legible, but with O1, I can just paste all of this data with CSV format straight into the chat. And here is my sales, and here is my employee lists and count and how many I had for each branch. And I want you to tell me essentially what can we do to increase sales, right? So not just get me some sort of a chart or whatever, what should I do? What can I do to increase sales? So this is a question that even a human will not rush into an answer, right? Wait a minute, I need to analyze this data. Maybe there is something else that is missing. Let me get back to you in a couple of days, right? So the answer, if you actually are able to see when I play the video, is that it takes O1 maybe 25, 30 seconds to come up with an answer. And it also comes up with a plan, like what I'm trying to do is to solve this task step by step. I know that in the back, at least, the text is not visible. I'm terribly sorry for that. But I have a bunch of sales, a bunch of sales data and a bunch of information about employees. So what it says here, in this case, it's 15 seconds time, is, okay, there are some things that I was able to find. This is what he's trying to highlight, is that there are some specific correlations in my data where specific events can actually influence the amount of my sales. Like, for example, you see that for specific products, the sales are highly correlated with the amount of discount that I gave, whereas for other kinds of products, it's actually not. Right? So you can tell me, for certain products, you probably want to rely more heavily on discounts. For others, it actually seems to be not so effective. And he was able to deduce that by looking at the data, raw data directly. And it can give you also impact. He was able to correlate the amount of sales with the staffing that you have and how much staff you have available versus the amount of customers that you get and sales that you get, and tell you that for specific locations, at the weekend, in this example, you may want to increase staff for those locations. Right? So it gives you a sort of checklist of what you may actually be able to do in order to increase sales. Adjust staffing levels, rely more heavily on discounts for specific types of products in your inventory, even consider things like part-time roles for just those days or periods of year when you have more sales, right? So it was an answer that took a while, but he was actually able to scour this data and find correlations, and the data was just pasted over. It was not like a specific format like Excel. You can just paste it over into the chat. Like I said, it is a preview feature. You can play with it in the playground, and you can see how well it can help you even with things like complex math situations, for which it is, in fact, quite a bit better than the standard models like GPT-4 and so on. Okay, we are out of time. I do want to open the floor for questions if you want to. Yeah, okay, quite a lot of hands
yes, of
up.
course, don't leave the stage. Who have questions?
Quite a few people.
Давай вот сюда.
Здравствуйте, можно, да, на русском? Да. Спасибо за вступление. У меня такой вопрос. Недавно я видел инструмент Microsoft Project Sophia. И какие различия в ключевых там задачах выполнения с Excel, Copilot и Microsoft Sophia?
Let me translate. Thank you for the presentation. And the question is, this guy recently saw Microsoft Project Sophia, and he's asking what's the difference between Project Sophia and Copilot in Excel?
So, I mean, there is always going to be some new iteration of our products, and we give this like these code names of internal projects. I cannot really tell you about the timeline of Project Sophia, but it may actually be the case that all of the features that you see there are actually integrated into Copilot for Excel, right? Not all of the code words that programs that we have make it into final products, so I cannot really give you a promise as to what will be available or when. But maybe some of those will eventually make it into Copilot. We will have just one branding, right? I know we are terrible at renaming things. We give new names to our products every time. But in this case, we'll probably incorporate some of those features into Copilot. Yes?
Нужен перевод? Ответ и перевод нужен? Ага, спасибо.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It's very impressive, the Copilot, what can Copilot do. And here, as a data specialist, I have a question. Like, usually when I use AI for data, like analysis, I usually like proofread and double check the information, double check the code, and I usually find, like, especially in ChatGPT, some like logical mistakes. And here's the question that I, as a data specialist, I want like my only goal and like one of the goal and dreams is that stakeholders comes with less questions. So like if our stakeholders use this like AI Copilot. What's the accuracy of it? Because as I said before, I usually meet logical mistakes in ChatGPT's answers and codes. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the question. It's a good one. I'm assuming that you're asking specifically about mistakes that the model itself may do, because what I usually find either with AI or without AI, but also more recently with AI, is that we'll also highlight mistakes in my data, which is a good thing. And if the model itself does mistakes, then that's a bad thing, right? Because it can transmit some sort of a wrong information. I would say that this is ongoing process, right? There is a Copilot for data. We have a few Copilots for data that I didn't have time to go into, like Copilot for Power BI, for instance, that analyzes data. And for each of those iterations of technology, I find there is less and less mistakes. I will not come and say that, okay, there is no more mistakes. There is no way that a Copilot for Excel can generate wrong Python code to do your forecast or your chart, right? It is still always a possibility to check, right? To verify that the result is okay. And yes, I get this request a lot from everyone. It's like, why does business come to me to get a chart when they could just be asking the tool and the tool can generate the chart, right? It's a very, very common request. And it's also the kind of main thing that they say. I would love to have this for my users, just as long as I know that the data, that the information that it gives is correct, right? It's at least it's computed correctly, because you don't know whether the underlying data is also correct. That is usually a bigger problem, I would say. So I would not say that this battle is completely finished, and there is no chance that even one can sometimes generate a wrong formula or a wrong calculation. But what I've seen is between the iterations of GPT-3, 3.5, 3.5 Turbo, 4, 4.4 Turbo, and so on, there is less and less mistakes. There is not zero, but it is going better, I would say. And there are also some other tools I can point you to for evaluating these kinds of answers. You may also have seen some kind of an evaluate or test button in AI Studio. That can also help with these kinds of scenarios. So you can even like automated test these kinds of scenarios before you release them to unsuspecting users. Thanks for the question. Good one.
Thank you so much. Sorin, which question you like most? We have only 2 questions. Excuse me.
You can find me over here in the break or whatever if you
Yeah,
want
we
to ask more
have
questions.
coffee break.
Yeah.
Which question you like the most?
I will
Oh,
give it
girl.
to the nice lady over in the back.
Лиза, пожалуйста, подари девушке подарок.